All right. Well, I will say welcome to the listeners. This is an episode of Unlocking Human Potential with Greg Clowminzer, and today my guest is Pam Dibbs, excuse me. And Pam and I are fellow practitioners and coaches, and I always enjoy Pam's lightheartedness and her wisdom, and so the theme of this is really talking about being with the unknown right now, or being with not knowing. And we're just going to give you, the listener, an opportunity to listen in to two coaches having a friendly conversation, what they're seeing in the world of business, life, relationships, and everything in between and beyond. So how's that sound, Pam?
That sounds epic, Greg. I'm so happy to chat with you, and and what I'm amazed by is our bloody brilliance, because you and I spoke a couple of months ago, I think, and we came up with this topic that we thought might be helpful without really at that time having any idea of what we would be looking at, all of us, in terms of being with not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I'm I'm struck by, just for me, how present I have been to my thinking, wanting to take me into lots of what if scenarios, with everything that's going on with COVID-19. Like just the other day, my thinking really wanted me to take me into the fact that my 88-year-old dad is in London on his own, and my brother's in Italy, my sister's in Calgary, and I'm here, and we wouldn't be able to get back to him right now very easily. And he has heart and lung issues, and I could just feel, the anxiety that line of thinking produced, and I caught it, as, and even the thought, you should have a conversation with him about that. And then, I'm just like, oh no, why would I do that? And so what then occurred to me as I kind of caught myself, what then occurred to me was, my job right now with my dad is to call him a lot and make him laugh. And so I've been, just spending time with him on the phone, and he's been reminiscing about, his childhood in Dublin, and, just, I don't know, it's been just a really, I've had more time to do things like that. And so I'm also present to just so many things I'm appreciating about what this situation has created in my own world.
Yeah.
So it's all of it.
I love what you're saying, and I what's really hitting me is that there's life, for you, and there's thoughts about what's going on, and there's thoughts about your dad, and then there's there's a certain type of thought that doesn't make any sense to you anymore, and there's a wisdom within you that's self-correcting, and I really want to highlight that, and I'd love to hear more about, see, for you and I, that makes real sense to me. I'm like, oh, I can see what she's done. I can see that the self-correcting mechanism. I see the wisdom that's occurring. But like, if maybe you could break that down and tell us what you saw, why you thought it wasn't helpful, and what your wisdom was in that moment. So if we kind of hit the replay, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. And the wake up for me, as I know it is for many, many people, once we know this is the wake up, right, is whenever what I call my feelings go south, so when I started to feel that agitation, and for me, it's, it was very much in my stomach, just like, just I could feel this sort of agitation and anxiety was my wake up call that something's gone south in my thinking.
Right, right.
So that was the first thing, was as I do the replay, was that real sense of, it's kind of, for me, how it I hope this makes sense, but help me have it make sense. It's like what occurred to me is that I'm on to the fact that I'm not onto anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like my thinking is onto something, right? There's a sort of quality of, oh, this is juicy, we need to look here.
Yeah.
It's important and urgent that you look in this direction and try and figure this thing out about your dad,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it has that sort of quality of looking like it's pointing me in a helpful place. And the urgency and the importance is also a sign that I'm not onto anything. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's a
Yeah, I
sign
do.
that
I do.
yeah.
I saw something similar this morning, and it was more around the feeling side of things, but it's like, oh my God, I'm trusting my thinking when it doesn't feel good. Like if people could see the fact that, oh my God, I'm trusting bad thought. And how I know it's bad thought is my stomach is bothering me. Something's off, but I trust it. I was just talking to somebody this morning, Pam. It's like I had an insight this morning about feeling. And I didn't
Yeah.
know, I never really knew anything.
Oh, excuse me. Oh my, that's
Uh, like I didn't know anything about feelings. When I was young, I was very sensitive, and then I just numbed out about them all. And then I got really involved in like men's work. And it was all about uncovering these feelings and digging around and interventions and all this stuff. And I had this insight this morning. It's like, well, why would I actually trust any of my feelings? You
yeah.
know, why would I trust them?
Mm,
So kind of what you're saying here, it's like the problem for me was I took my thoughts too serious, and I
mm,
took my feelings too serious, and I reacted to them all day long, all day long.
yeah.
And then what I saw is I saw the wisdom where people said you want to learn to respect your feelings, but I'm seeing that there's a deeper feeling that I want to respect, not the kind of above the line feelings, the wavy feelings. Like those ones are just kind of giving me a real binary hot and cold. you know
Yeah.
and if it doesn't feel good, why in the world would I trust that, for one? And number two is, if it really feels good, why would I trust that either? And so, because I've seen myself and clients, when they're in a high feeling, they make really shitty decisions too.
Yes.
So I'm not really interested in trusting those feelings so much anymore. Like
Yeah.
there's something underneath there, and that's kind of what we're talking about. There's a not knowing. There's an
Yeah.
uncertainty. There's a space within. There's something fertile there that has a feeling to it. And that's what I'm having more and more respect for and trusting, not these other feelings. So
Right.
that's hot off the press this morning.
I love it. I love it. And you know what that has me think about, Greg, as I do the replay about what was going on around, my dad, is that when I caught on to, oh, I'm onto the fact that I'm not onto anything in my thinking. And I've noticed this is common for me, is that when I catch that, and I just love everybody to know that I don't catch it every time, you know and when I do, like in that situation, there was then this different idea that came from a different place, that had a different quality and a different feeling that you're describing. And it was that idea that, oh, right now, what what would be really helpful for you and your dad, you know, for me and my dad, would be to just be with him, you know, in more often, and just spend time with him on the phone. And that had such a different feeling to it. Like, so for me, it's been helpful to distinguish the difference in the quality of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
it makes total sense. I get it. What I'm hearing is that, um, reaching out to your dad could be from a place of fear or reaction, or there's a deeper feeling, and then moving closer to him from wisdom or common sense, but it's coming from love. It's coming from, it's a different driver, if you will, is what I'm
yeah.
hearing.
And it feels really different. And I also notice that the inspiration or ideas I get from that place, um, they're slower, they have a neutrality to them. I always find this hard to describe.
Yeah,
So,
because it's a feeling, isn't it?
yeah,
It's really hard to describe, but even as you're talking, I love the way that you're talking right now, and it has such a lovely feeling to it that I don't really need words.
right.
And even though I might be speaking a little bit faster, I'm still in a lovely feeling. Even what here's the other thing I found is that yeah, if I talk slower, I do have a nice feeling, but I'm not limited to talking slower to be in a nice feeling. That
Yeah,
was really that was really insightful for me, because as I started to hang around this understanding, I thought, oh, I need to always talk slower.
yeah,
I did. I thought that's the right way to do it. And it's like, no, I just have to be in a nice feeling. And it doesn't matter if I talk fast or slow.
yeah.
Yes, sometimes it will help, particularly if another person or a listener has a really busy mind. Talking slow can be really helpful. But there's always a feeling underneath all communication. That's
Mm,
what's affecting people. Not
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
speed, not the content, but it's the place in which it's originating from that impacts
yeah. And I don't want to skip over something really profound that you said, um, in case neither of us say anything else profound. No, no, but I don't want to skip over. You mentioned about, when you, and you've noticed with your clients too, is that when you're in this sort of heightened, positive state,
me.
that's also a place where people can make crappy decisions. You
True.
know, so any extreme, I get really curious about. You know, I've learned that.
Vicious.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because it can look like what, when I first came across this understanding, you know, it first looked to me that, oh, great, I was now identifying when everything had gone south, you know, my thinking and my feelings had gone south. And then I was looking for the opposite,
Mhm.
you know, and now it looks to me, you know, it looks really different to me,
Mhm.
because there's more. I also know that I'm not onto anything in my thinking when I'm in that heightened, what I would kind of call, for me, it feels a bit giddy. That, you know, um, I think I used to spend quite a bit of time there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, what's occurring to me right now is, for anyone that's still listening,
Maybe
uh,
we should,
it's like, what the heck are these guys talking
I
about?
know,
And,
maybe we should give some sort of
well,
prize if you listen to the end.
yeah, well,
Then,
yeah, a prize. Listen to the end. Yeah, a stimulus package. Uh, well, I think what I'm hearing is out there, people are having a really different experience than I am.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing. And like when people ask me, I say, well, how are you doing? I said, well, God, I'm doing really well. And I'm really human though. When I turn on the news or I hear somebody really bummed out, it really affects me. I notice it really affects me because that's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how things work. So I'm pretty mindful of that, you know, and it's kind of like with your dad and that feeling when I get really engaged and worked up in something that I don't have any control over, or a lot of uh, misinformation or conflicting information or a lot of stuff out there that I really have no business in, I can be, there's what I call a level of informed, but then there's this step beyond that, of obsessing.
And
And so what I've noticed is I'm human, if I give that too much of attention,
yeah,
I will contract, I'll get that tummy thing that you were talking about. And I just have learned to turn it off much quicker because this nice, like people ask me, say, well, how are you doing, Greg? I said, well, I'm experiencing moments of peace, moments of clarity, moments of gratitude, and really moments of love and understanding and beauty. And the key is they're moments. It could pass at any time, you
yeah,
know? And
yeah,
so I'm really cherishing the moments that I'm having. And it seems the more I cherish those, they almost like a snowball,
yeah.
they're not a given. They're not certain, that they're moments, and I'm really appreciating those. So,
What
uh,
I love, Greg, that you're pointing to is because it would be so easy to discount those as even you being delusional, like right now, who should be feeling that with
yeah,
everything we've got going on, like, um, and that of course, I've studied a lot of neuroscience, and, there was a neuroscience teacher that once shared with us that for the brain, negative thoughts are like Velcro. They're very sticky because the brain is wired for threat. So it's constantly looking at what's threatening in the world. And right now, it's got a lot of opportunity to feed a lot of thinking about why this is threatening and why we should run a lot of what if scenarios. Um, and that positive thoughts are more like Teflon. And so, it's interesting to sort of think about, I kind of experience, I know it used to be for me that it was just so easy to sort of gloss over the grateful moments, the compassionate moments, the loving moments, and really hone in on the stickier negative, like they're so grabby, those ones, And so I love that because I think for a lot of people, it would be easy to miss right now
mhm,
those moments of connection. People are spending a lot more time with their families,
true. That's true.
and they might talk more about the discord, or the conflict that might be happening, and not about those moments of connection and compassion with each other and love.
Yeah.
But it would be easy, right? Because we kind of taught ourselves to focus more and chat and complain about those things.
Hmm.
So I love that there's just an invitation in what I hear you saying, Greg, to,
Well, you know what it's getting confirmed is this understanding that you and I are engaged in. And it's like when somebody says, like, what I see in the world is I'm so hopeful. I see humanity coming together and I see so much kindness. And I also realize that there's probably 5 billion other people that are aware of this coronavirus now that are having their own unique experiences that may be seeing something other than that. That's what's really fascinating, is that um, the understanding that we're in is being confirmed right now with so many separate realities about what's going on, from conspiracy theories to the planet healing itself to it's the end of time, it's apocalyptic. Like, everybody's in their own reality. That's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, and even the
It's
reality.
also indicative, what people see is indicative of their level of consciousness.
Yeah.
You know, that's fascinating to me.
And for me, that it's become apparent that there are two viruses. You know, one is COVID-19,
Yeah.
which has our attention as it should, and the other is the panic or fear about COVID-19.
Yeah.
And the second virus is optional. That's how it looks to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be moment to moment optional,
Right.
you know. But I think it's helpful to see the difference, because it can look to us like the panic about COVID-19 and the fear about it is keeping us safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we then sort of point our imagination with our, you know, we go into the what ifs, and then we use our wonderful, powerful imaginations to create all of these future scenarios, in this illusion that that's going to keep us safer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I love that. I think, if, for me, what I started to see is the power of the mind and the misuse of thought, and the proper use, or a nicer use of thought. And imagination is a powerful thing. But you add imagination to fear, and you get terror, you get anxiety, you get stress. You add imagination to love and understanding, you get possibility. You get a future that looks bright and is hopeful. So
Yeah.
that's
And
that's a proper use of imagination in my mind.
isn't it? And what I've seen, I run another business as well as coaching with my husband that's around TV and film production around aviation stories. Why run one business when you can run two? I mean, that makes sense, right? And so most of our productions that we had lined up for this year have been cancelled. And like many people who are listening, well, maybe we have one listener left, Greg.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad might listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, anyway, what's been really interesting is how, in that place of imagination around love and understanding, like understanding our clients' needs to change things, and what's been really cool for my husband and I is that we have been extraordinarily creative in this time. Like, we are having the most, dare I say it myself, brilliant ideas that we haven't had before this for our business. So I'm not saying, we haven't had any brilliant ideas, but there's the necessity of what we're in when we don't put our imagination towards the what ifs in the fear realm. And when I say not doing it, it's not like those thoughts never occur to me, because they do, but I know not to follow them and go there and build on them and give them weight and make them data. So what's happened, because I know that, and I'm so grateful that I know that, but because I know that, what's been interesting that's happened is all of this sort of creativity. So the imagination is being used to create from this place. So, my husband's going to start a podcast, and he's going to interview aviators, and he has a network that he's built for 30 years of the most amazing people who right now have a lot of time on their hands to be interviewed, because nobody's flying really. So
If you need
Um,
one more, I have one. I have a friend of mine who's an aviator as well. So if he needs anybody
uh,
else, it sounds like he's
well,
fully.
the idea is that it's the listener would be sort of hearing him having chats with his mates.
Mm,
You know, it's people that he's worked with and flown with who have done all these um, incredible sort of aerial photography missions with him, because his big specialty is he's basically in one plane filming other planes in flight. So sometimes he's hanging out of doorways, you know, with the door off the plane, and so he's, you know, he's come across and, you know, met just the most amazing people on that journey. And even just when we started to write a list of who he might interview, it was amazing. It was kind of like a really great trip down memory lane for us to, what about the time when you know, you did this and he did this, and, you know, all these great stories. And but it was also a sort of like, wow, look at how many people you know, and what would be incredible to share their stories with the world, and how inspiring that would be. And most of the air shows are probably going to be cancelled for the season, and so those enthusiasts are looking for places to get some entertainment
yeah.
and lightness and relief.
Mm,
And, you know, it was just this sort of seeing that we could be of service,
yeah. Yeah.
you
I
know.
call that pivoting in uncertain times.
Yeah,
Pivoting really.
yeah.
You know, a lot of people are talking about uncertainty. And what what advice we might be able to give people living with uncertainty, because I think uncertainty and not knowing are kissing cousins.
Yeah.
They really are. But I think what would be helpful is, like, my relationship with uncertainty and not knowing isn't what it is today. It's radically different today. And I was wondering, like, if you looked within your own life, Pam, like, what did uncertainty and not knowing look like for you before the understanding?
Mm.
And then what does it look like now? Because, somebody told me a long time ago, they said, Greg, you just sound like you got it two together. And then they heard some of my stories, and they go, oh my God. And they said, you should tell your stories more, Greg, because that'll make you a lot more relatable. So, I'm curious, Pam, you know, with her, what was her relationship with uncertainty and not knowing,
Mm.
kind of a tell on yourself.
I'd
And
love to tell
and
on myself.
and then how has that changed for you with
Mm.
this understanding? So I think that would be helpful for people to hear, in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other piece I'd like to speak to, Greg, I'm going to name it just so I don't forget, is around humor.
Humor. Oh,
Um, as a resiliency tool that is innate in all of us. So I'd love us to just
yeah, we'll definitely talk
yeah,
about that as well.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah. Um, so for me, how it looked was, it was something to manage. So I was constantly assessing, and Greg, this was so interesting because I didn't know I was doing this until it stopped happening. And it stopped happening after a 4-day intensive with Dick and Bettinger.
Mm,
But I didn't know this was happening before that, and it's been happening for decades. And what it was this constant assessment that was going on about how I was doing. And a lot of the assessment was around controlling things, like even like how productive I'm being, like, so this constant assessment. The way it would sound in my head is, you better pick up the pace. You're not on top of things, and it's going to get out of control. The behind the scenes was, you can't let this get out of control. So I would say I was kind of on the, if there was a spectrum, I was on the control freak end, you know
yeah.
but it wouldn't have looked like that from outside, because it was this internal chatter and noise, constantly assessing how Pam was doing around whether or not she had it together, and also whether it looked like I had it together. You know, like there was a lot of managing the perceptions that others had of me, of whether I was in control and had it together.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of sort of performing and perfecting and what I would call hustle, you know, like, but it wouldn't have looked like that, you know, like, so really I was very artful,
Mm.
not without knowing it, but this assessment that was
You had a good
constant.
act going, is what you're saying.
I had a great act going, even to myself.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
You know, because I used to teach mindfulness, and I'll give you an example of this,
Yeah.
Greg. Talk about telling tales on myself. Just before we left the UK, listeners the really smart ones may notice a very slight accent. But just before we left the UK and came to move to the US, I was doing grocery shopping one day, and I came home, and my husband was helping me unload, and he picks up dog food. Now, we don't have a dog, and he looks at me and says, "Dog food?" And I'm like, "Oh." And then he picks up baby nappies, diapers, and we don't have kids. And so what had happened is I had gone around the grocery store, and somewhere at the end of my shopping trip, I had picked up someone else's cart. I had then taken each item out of the cart, put it on the checkout belt. I had then bagged each item, so I picked it up a second time. I had also paid for somebody else's groceries. And then I had gone home without knowing that I had basically picked up somebody else's groceries. I mean, it's just a good job there wasn't a baby in the cart, because I would have taken the baby, put them in the bag, you know, come home. How would I explain that one, you know?
Well, you look good the whole time. You look like you
I
had it together, right?
looked great. But here's the thing. So think about how much, and I know what was going on because I now know the difference, is this assessment. What have I got to do next? What's this? When is that going to happen? How are we going to manage that? How are we going to navigate that? But it was all of this planning and what if scenario managing, so that I was fully prepared for every eventuality. It's like, come on, I've got it, you know, throw it at me, because, you know, I've already figured out how we can deal with it, you know. And this constant assessment that was going on, that had me really be disconnected to myself, to people, you know, relationships, and to the present. So yeah, that, talk about on that end of the control freak spectrum. And so now there's just such a difference in, and I remember like this one day where I woke up and it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd had, you know, pretty interesting day, you know, work with clients, and I suddenly realized something was different, and it felt like something was wrong initially, but for some reason I wasn't aware of this assessment. And it seemed to me like it just sort of disappeared overnight. And I didn't even know that that was running before that moment, before it looked to me like it vanished. And I don't know whether it did vanish, Greg, or whether I just stopped paying attention to it. I experienced it as if it vanished.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, you know. So yeah, what's your tell on Greg story?
Well, you know, I'm a recovering control freak and a recovering know-it-all. and so, you know, I got two strikes going for me there.
Yeah.
You
You're
know,
such an overachiever.
yeah. You know, I was sitting here and I was thinking about like uncertainty. Like I start to get a little worked up right now because I see something I hadn't seen before. Like there was some life events early on for me. My dad did two tours in Vietnam, and ended up leaving my mom with 3 kids, me being the oldest when I was young, and there was some uncertainty there, and it was traumatic for me. It wasn't
Mm.
like I didn't see this till right now. Like I, from a very young age, uh, like being uncertain and not knowing wasn't a good thing. There was a lot of pain associated with it. I never saw that till right now.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and then after that, shortly after that, my mother remarried, and so what was kind of a known in terms of a family system was very unknown now because there was new players. I had stepbrothers and stepsisters, and it was unsettling for me, really. And then shortly after that, my mother remarried. My sister, who was 4.5 years younger than me, died of leukemia. You know,
Wow.
so I had all these things that happened, and I didn't have any answers to it. It was like, and I didn't like that. I didn't. It was a horrible feeling. And so, in hindsight, I look back is that I really wanted certainty, and I really wanted to know as a way to never experience those horrible feelings again. And I
Mm.
never saw that. And I never really put it together in the way I'm putting it together now. And so you could say I had a really unhealthy relationship throughout my early years, all the way up into, my mid to late 20s.
Mm.
And I could not stand the thought of not knowing something or being uncertain. So what that did is it kept my world very small. If I didn't know something, I wouldn't get I wouldn't get anything that would challenge that. I needed to be the smartest guy in the room or whatever it
Mm.
was. So my world became very small
Mm.
because I didn't dare not know. Okay. And then
Mm.
I also became a voracious learner. I became passionate about learning because I figured the more I learned, the more I know, the more I would never not know. So,
Right.
but it was what I learned, is that, or what I've discovered throughout the years is that the kind of learning that I was learning ultimately wasn't very helpful because it
Mm.
was all intellectual. It was all kind of preparing as a preventative measure.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I came to the principles and understanding that I started to see that there's a different knowing that I
Mm.
hadn't had a lot of respect for. And like much like you, I don't know how it happened or when it happened,
Mm.
but suddenly I started to realize I started to have a new relationship with uncertainty and not knowing,
Mm.
such to the extent that I have come to not just respect but adore uncertainty, and to
Mm.
adore not knowing,
Mm.
and to actually find that that's where the real juice is for me. And
Mm.
I've always loved learning, so I couldn't be happier because I've found the real way to learn and the real way to um, uh, unearth, or unlock true knowledge, not just feeding my intellect as
Mm.
as a way to cover up my insecurities of never wanting uh, to not know.
Mm.
Because one of the things about not knowing that I've discovered, and when I look within, is like it brought up so much insecurity for me. It made
Mm.
me feel stupid. It made me feel silly. I felt embarrassed. I struggled with that for a lot of my life up until my young adult life. So it was something to be avoided at all cost, is to not feel embarrassed or vulnerable or
And
any.
I, and I and I think that's, I could imagine people really relating to this, Greg, right now, is because that, it could look like being with the not knowing is unsafe right now.
Mhm.
Like it wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah.
But what that has me think about is, and this part of my learning and the understanding is, I feel really tender to, because it was such a huge insight for me. But to really know that my insight is reliable, and my resilience is reliable in any future moment. To know it in my core, like not just an intellectual idea that we're resilient, but I really know that in any future moment, I am going to have ideas about what to do that I couldn't possibly know in this moment ahead of time. So it makes no sense for me to run the what ifs now, because the future is an incomplete equation, because I can't know in advance what my brilliance is going to be in that moment. And maybe the brilliance will be to do nothing. Those nudges have been just as helpful, but I can rely on it. I can rely on something occurring to me, it being responsive in that future moment. And so that has me take so much off my mind. There's a sort of resting in that, oh my God, it's just it really has touched me.
Well, what's coming up for me right now, Pam, is maybe talking a little bit about resilience and then putting a cherry on this with a little humor. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Yeah. So I know we share some mentors of this understanding. And I think earlier I said that innate resilience has been alive for me, or in coming alive for me. And as you were talking right now, talking about resilience, I really have ears for that right now and eyes for that. And I remember a mentor in the understanding making a big deal of innate resilience, and I couldn't figure out why they're making such a big deal of it. And I didn't even really know what they were talking about. I'd heard the words before, but I had no. In fact, probably for a couple of years they talked about it, and I'm like, it went in one ear and out the other, And so it started to wake up within me. But as we were talking, and I was sharing a little bit about my backstory, and I had to look within my own life. What do I know about resilience? And at first I said, well, I don't know anything. But then after the few things that I've shared with you here, and there's much more, I started to look back. I go, well, the fact that I'm here and I got through all of these life events is proof that resilience is innate, or I wouldn't be here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what they're talking about.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I've been through bankruptcy, I've been through divorce, I've been through loss, I've been through identity crisis and law and career transition and all these things. And in the moment, it just felt like, oh my God, I'll never bounce back from this. In the moment, it feels like the future is just going to be more of the same terror. That's what it looks like in the moment. It's only hindsight that I can go, oh shit, that was my resilience that got me through. And it really wasn't even anything I did. There's something else that got me through it. So that's what I have to say. I'd love to hear your thoughts or comments.
What I want to highlight in that is how easy it is to dismiss or not even look to the evidence that is there for all of us.
Yeah.
Right? And how easy it is to maybe dismiss that as, oh, I just got lucky that I managed to get through that, or, well, that was because someone else helped me, or, whatever way we might be able to sort of dismiss it, or argue against it.
Yeah.
But how helpful it is to see how resilient and that we all have proof of that.
Yeah.
when we look
Here's
back.
something really embarrassing is I've been coaching for about 27 years, Pam, and for a long time I can see I almost burnt myself out a few times. And it's because I didn't see the innate resilience in all human beings. And you know what happens when a coach doesn't see the innate resilience in another human being? Is they keep the client really busy and they have a lot of pressure on themselves to get things, to make things happen.
Yep.
And I can't tell you what a lifesaver this understanding has been to invigorate my practice again, to get better results with clients, and to have an infinite level of more fun and joy in it, because I see that everybody's sitting on innate resilience just like I was. It's just unrecognized. That's
Yeah.
it. And the more people start to recognize it, the more it comes forward, the more it's like untapping this well of invisible energy that we're all sitting on. It unlocks the human potential within all of us. And so there's nothing for the coach to do other than really draw forth that innate resilience in another. At least that's what it looks like to me now. It might look different a week from now or a month from now. It's always kind of changing, but that's how it's starting to look to me, Pam.
You know, I originally trained as a coach with a program that was certified by the International Coach Federation, and I got quite sort of involved and invested in
Me too.
the ICF. Yeah. And so one of the cornerstones is that I believe that my clients are whole, capable, resourceful, and creative. And for me, what I realize now is that I used to see that as aspirational.
Mm.
Like, I believe I can help them get there, which is really different to what I'm hearing you say and what I experience now with my clients, which is I know they are. Like, it's not an aspirational thing I hold for them or I believe they can be. No, I know they are.
Yeah.
And, you know, my job is to stay in that knowing with.
Yeah. Same here. Like before, those look like skills. They were
Yes.
need to help them polish their swords, so to speak. They look like skills, and now they just look like, well, that's just what naturally unfolds when people realize their innate resilience and well-being and wisdom. That's a given.
Yeah.
And that'll bloom and blossom and flower in whatever is unique to that beautiful flower, tree, gift, whatever human being. And that's the other really fun part is that like before, I thought I had to manicure and manage the fruit tree, so to speak, and I just see it so different now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not, and I used to really love teaching people skills, and I'm really good at teaching skills, and skills are really fun. But what's more fun is to help people unlock their own wisdom, their own innate resilience, and their own innate well-being.
Mm.
That's really, really where the juice is for me these days.
Yeah. I get the sort of, you know, most days I really pinch myself that I get to do this work, that I get to be with people in this way. And I hear that from you too, Greg.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about humor
Yeah.
before we wrap up here.
Yes.
You know, I'll just share something briefly with you. Particularly with this pandemic that's going on, and what I call forced reflection. And that's really what everybody's it's a forced reflection, but for I don't know, I can't speak for you. For me, I've been reflective for a very long time. So it's
Yeah.
nothing new for me, but for the average person, they're getting forced to kind of reflect.
Mm.
And anyway, so I was looking at some point, we're going to look back in my mind and see humanity going through predictable stages of their quarantine.
Mm.
And one of the stages that I'm seeing as a possibility of going through is both the stage of creativity and the stage of humor. So
Mm.
anyways, that's your tee up, is like, because when
Love it.
people reflect and they come home, I think one of the natural byproducts is creativity and humor and lightheartedness and kindheartedness and more heartful. So humor seems to kind of be part of that, having people not taking life so serious and kind of coming back to more playful and more humor. At least that's what I'm seeing. So
Yeah,
take it away, Pam.
yeah, I love it. Oh, this is one of my favorite things to talk about and think about, is that, it looks to me like there's a real misunderstanding about what's helpful when we have problems. And that, like, I will often hear leaders that I work with say, stop monkeying around, let's get serious so we can figure this problem out. And what we actually know from research is that, no, what we need is more monkey, like more monkeying around, please. Because what happens, even just when we look from the neuroscience, when we're in that place of laughing, when we think about what humor is, it's reframing. So because we've been able to reframe in that moment, we are now the observer of what's happening, and we're having another take on it, another perspective. And even when you look at, what's happening in the brain when that happens, is that we're setting the brain up really well with great dopamine hits. We're setting it up really well to be able to hear our ideas and what the neuroscientists would call insights, what you and I might call wisdom or mind. But we're actually really setting things up well for us to be in that place of creativity and even have ideas about what we might do next. And research even shows that just playing a funny video for a couple of minutes to a team before you have them brainstorm, they'll have more ideas, they'll have more out of the box ideas, and they will feel more connected to each other. So for me, like, one of the things that I've been doing with my clients and with my family is to ask people what's been funny about what we're in right now. And, people are like, well, should we be laughing about it? When we're really trying, it's a very serious problem. And I'm like, for us as humans to have lightness in this, and that doesn't mean we're not going to pay attention to the things we need to do to keep us safe. Those things can sit together. So for me, like, just, I wanted to share a couple of funny things. Like, it occurred to me the other day that there's an unprecedented use of the word unprecedented.
Yeah.
And like, there's all this sort of language that has come in. It's not a new coronavirus, it's novel. Like, there's just, I'm just noticing interesting ways, that we're sheltering in place, and interesting terms that we've come up with that sort of add a layer of this, it being just highly serious. And then the other day, my husband woke up, and he is somebody who loves animals and critters. Like, he just is, really, really always thinking about how the animals are doing and critters. And he said, oh God, I'm so worried with the coronavirus. And I said, why? What's going on? And he said, the pigeons. I said, I'm sorry? He said, well, think about all the pigeons. They normally eat from all the scraps from the parks, and nobody's in the parks. The parks are closed. And, the pigeons just have no food. And of course, I just fell about laughing. And I said, I'm not sure it's going to make headline news. I don't know, but there's so much funny stuff that's happening for all of us right now in our households. One of my friends said the other day that her family is spending so much time together. When they came to eat dinner, they could hear each other chewing because they had nothing to say now, like,
Yeah.
So, but there's so much lightness that's available to us in that can have us tap into that reframing and that just ability to have some relief and to laugh together. I do really believe that the shortest distance between two people is a good laugh. That was something Victor Borg said, and I see that and I feel that.
Well, it loosens the soil of seriousness, which makes room for creativity to kind of
Mhm.
percolate up, is what it looks like to me. I loved your saying about unprecedented use of the word unprecedented. President. I love that, and like the overuse of the word uncertain times. It's like
Yes,
every time is uncertain.
exactly. I
it's like
know.
it's just like everybody's like the other thing that we're all we're forced into recognizing the truth that it's always uncertain times. We're forced into the truth of always being in a place of not knowing. We're kind of forced into that. We're getting our noses rubbed into that, and the illusion of the bubble of certainty and the illusion of the bubble of knowing is getting popped, and people are having to learn how to really align themselves with a deeper truth that we've always lived in uncertain times, and
Yeah.
we've never known.
Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that, Greg. I just, yeah. And I thank you for letting us end on a human note.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been
Yeah.
delightful, really delightful, Pam. Thank you so much for, taking some time out and being with me today. I was really looking forward to it, and perhaps we
Me
can
too.
do it sometime.
Yeah. My pleasure. It was
Thank
a lot of fun.
thank you.